It's a pleasure to welcome you all to the New Delhi World Book Fair 2026. Today we have with us Professor Gautam Desiraju, one of India's most distinguished scientists and thinkers with a remarkable career spanning over 4 decades. A former professor at the University of Hyderabad and the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, he has supervised dozens of doctoral scholars, authored over 275 research papers, and his work has received more than 65,000 citations worldwide. Professor Desiraju has served as president of the International Union of Crystallography, chaired major international conferences, and sits on editorial boards of leading scientific journals across the world. He has been honored with several national and international awards. Alongside him is Deekhit Bhattacharya, a lawyer and policy analyst based in Delhi with academic training in economics and law from the University of Delhi. His work lies at the intersection of state, society, and business and has authored long form research and policy essays for various platforms. He has also served as a research associate at Global Order, a Delhi based policy research center. Together, they have co-authored two major books published by Provoking, Delimitation and States Reorganization for a Better Democracy in Bharat, and their latest work, India's Supply Chains in a World at War. So we have a few questions for people to understand this book a little better. So let's start with your first book, Delimitation and States Reorganization. So for those people who haven't read it yet, could you tell us what this book is about and what is the problem of trying to address?
Good evening, everyone. The main problem with delimitation is that the size of our parliamentary constituencies is very, very uneven today. And as a result, some constituencies have many more people than other constituencies. So the value of a vote to elect somebody to the Lok Sabha can vary very widely. If there are more people in a constituency, that value of that vote becomes less. And if there are a smaller number of people in that constituency, the value of the vote becomes more, simply because of a purely arithmetical problem. Now, on the other hand, our constitution tells us that every citizen has to be treated equally in the law. And so now we have an open violation of this, because every citizen is not being treated equal. My vote may be worth less or more than your vote, depending on how many people live in my constituency, which is very uneven because of the urban migration. What has happened is our urban constituencies are underrepresented and the rural constituencies have become overrepresented. So, unfortunately, we have had a delimitation freeze for 50 years, which is just over this year. So, there is an immediate political problem to sort out, and that is why this problem of delimitation was an urgent one, and my co-author Mr. Bhattacharya and myself decided to write this particular book.
Sir has already covered what it means at a constituency level, but it has massive ramifications for interstate relations and center-state relations. So today we are facing elections in two major states that have usually not had a great relationship with the center, that is Tamil Nadu and West Bengal. A good part of many of the debates we have, which are framed in a cultural sense, such as the North-South divide or the East-West divide, are in fact due to varying representations vis-a-vis the states in the parliament. What does that mean? If tomorrow there is a state such as UP, which has 80 Lok Sabha seats, and there is a state such as Mizoram, which has only one, will the Prime Minister give a meeting to the Chief Minister of UP more readily, or the Chief Minister of Mizoram more readily? So the solution by and large is, can our states strike a balance between economics and between culture such that they are roughly equally sized, so that the center does not have an incentive to discriminate between states? That is also important because many of our states simply borrow British boundaries and have no relationship with either economic interests of the people or the cultural representation. apart from just the cultural representation, there are large parts of major states which might have their economic interests lying with some other state or within their own people, but they do not get the investments that are needed and they do not get the economic policy making that is needed because of a distant capital or because they simply choose to vote differently based on their identity. So this very problem is not just about individual citizens such as you and me or about individual constituencies, but it's also about how we structure the country economically, socially and politically so that everyone gets a better deal.
Thank you so much. So, we would just want to know, most people have heard the word delimitation, but most of us do not exactly know what it means.
Right.
So, if you could just explain in layman's terms, what exactly does delimitation mean, and what role did it play? Like what exactly happened in the 70s that led to the freezing of delimitation?
So let me explain delimitation using a very practical example. Let's say this table has to be divided into two constituencies, table A and table B. There are two ways of doing it. Either sir and me become one constituency, either ma'am and sir can become one constituency. Now what if I am culturally and economically I have more affinity with ma'am, but I'm forced in a constituency with sir? Then the representation that will occur from the constituency will be definitionally faulty. They will not make the economic decisions that are appropriate for both of us. They will not be able to make the political decisions that are appropriate for both of us. So from the get-go, our constitution says, let us divide the country into constituencies to the best of our ability, where political and economic interests can be taken together and people can represent themselves. So members of parliament are your representatives, both in an economic and a social sense. That representation fails if disparate people are brought together in a constituency, or if it becomes so large that, let's say, if me and sir is one constituency and ma'am is one constituency, but what if she gets to elect two representatives? That's not fair either, right? But that's effectively what is happening today. Now what had happened was there were many theories at one point in time connecting economic growth and population growth. Most of these theories have been debunked today. And the most damaging of the theories at that point was the state can actually enforce measures to change the fertility rate, which is the number of children a woman on an average may have. Today we know that the relationship is that the richer the society is, the less kids they have. But the other way, that the less kids they have, the richer the society will be, does not hold. As a matter of fact, we have not found any evidence that systematically in any major country population control has worked. Based on this faulty theory, at that point in time, the Prime Minister decided that let's put a freeze on delimitation. What do we mean by freeze? The Constitution says that let's have a delimitation every 5 years because people migrate. Some places will have more children, some places will have less children. So it will become a self-correcting system over time where every 5 years we make new decisions. The Prime Minister, for both political reasons as well as the faulty science that dominated at that point in time, said we will not have any delimitation for 25 years because we want to incentivize population control as it will help economic growth. Now, as I've already discussed, that theory has been debunked, and it's basically just faulty science. But it also favored the Congress at that point in time because it limited the rising representation which anti-Congress states could have had at that point in time. By the time Vajpayee ji came, he was under a severe coalition dharma situation where he had to either choose between running a coalition government or staying out of power by bringing devolution.
Actually, Vajpayee did want to have smaller states and delimitation. The coalition dharma prevented, and as a token measure, he was able to convince his coalition partners to separate out Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand and Uttarakhand. So they allowed him to carve out those three small states, all of which were justified socially, culturally, geographically. Vajpayee ji's plan was much bigger than what was finally done in 2001. And as a result, the delimitation freeze has essentially continued for 50 long years. And this year, 2006, the delimitation freeze is over. So there is an immediate political problem that our present government and legislature have to solve unless they do the unthinkable and extend the freeze for another 25 years. Because at the end of another 25 years, it would be 75 years of constituency freezing. And in answer to your question, what is delimitation? It is redrawing the size of the constituencies so that roughly the same number of people live in each of these constituencies. And in our scheme, where we have 75 small states, each state will send 12 members to the new Lok Sabha, and which is arithmetically a much fairer and a much more even distribution of votes, so that once again we come back to every citizen having the same right in terms of electing a member to the Lok Sabha. You have to talk a little bit less.
Thank you. I think this word is a little more clearer to us now. So next, if we talk about states reorganization. States today, so linguistic identity and emotional attachment to state mean a lot to a lot of people. So when you say states reorganization, on what basis do you mean that these states should be reorganized, and how this should ideally take place without emotionally hurting the common people?
Nobody is really hurt. I think a lot of this thing has been stoked and politically managed today. If there is one take-home line from this book, it is a strong critique of the idea of linguistic states. And we go on the shoulders of B.R. Ambedkar, who in 1955, in a small pamphlet he wrote that one state, one language is something that should be followed everywhere. So if you have a state, everybody in that state should speak only one language. And then he equally strongly said that the opposite is very harmful. One language, one state, which means all people who speak a particular language should belong to one state. And so he said that would be the beginning of the end of India. And he wrote this in 1955, shortly before his death. And in chapter 2 of this book, we very much stand on the broad shoulders of B.R. Ambedkar, because the man was able to predict so accurately what has been happening. And in fact, we wrote recently a tongue-in-cheek article. One of the most diverse states in the country is the state in which I live, Karnataka. And in this scheme of division of states, we've actually asked for 7 small states in present-day Karnataka. And I call it tongue-in-cheek because I said we'll have 7 Kannada-speaking chief ministers coming and going from Delhi. It's much better than having just one. Of course, the comment was made in a lighter vein. But if you look at the diversity profile, what our scheme tries to do is micro-diversity satisfies an emotional need, and we need that. The success of a movie like Kantara only tells you that that micro-diversity is very important. But the national identity of being a Bharatiya, that comes from an overall system of unity and feeling one. So micro-diversity does not go against the principle of national patriotism. People always ask us, oh, don't you think so many small states will cause balkanization? Above all, not. In fact, it is this micro-diversity which will strengthen the overall national identity which all of us feel. Nobody has to come and tell us to write a book saying that we all feel like Bharatiyas or we all feel like Indians. We know what we feel. So sometimes it is better not to try to put in imperfect words what we feel emotionally. Very briefly, he says.
2 quick comments based on hard data.
We'll go to the second bit.
Firstly, the economic performance of the smaller states that have been created. With just one exception, almost all of the smaller states that have been created have outperformed economically on growth their parent states. That is one. And the reasons are obvious. They can make social and economic policy according to their local requirements. The second, and perhaps slightly different take, is that our national security has only improved in sensitive places whenever the number of states have been increased in that place. So as a matter of fact, when you had the NEFA back then and slowly states were taken out and the Northeast as we today understand it came into being, that has correlated with insurgency going down and down, not up. And even in Assam, it's only after territorial councils were made, which are just states within states, where you saw that ultimately the insurgency started dying down or at least reducing. And we've seen that experience play out elsewhere in the country as well. So many of the arguments that are made have no basis in our historical experience and lived data, and this book intends to capture many of these observations.
I would just finally say what some of the people have said. Kushal Mehra says, the book makes you think hard. And Sandeep Balakrishna says, this book makes for painful and alarming reading, but it is a warning that couldn't have come at a better time. And Harsh Madhusudan says, this may not be the last word on the topic, perhaps, but certainly one of the most eloquent beginnings. So we've raised some questions, we don't provide all the answers.
Thank you so much. I think we can move on to the next book.
Please, he has a question.
Yes.
I am from the state of Uttar Pradesh, and still we have already passed the first quarter of 21st century. And there are today question that the state should be divided into 3 parts or 4 parts. How much it is justified we are setting in 2026 to divide the state and then grow it? Despite
Could you please repeat the last sentence?
Divide the state and then grow. Because there is an argument that small states have better economic conditions, better government.
Yeah.
But how to justify it? We have a very comprehensive machine of governance, Panchayat Raj system. And even today we are saying that the state should be divided for the progress. I think it's not justified.
No, it is certainly justified. I think you are not correct. The move to divide Uttar Pradesh came as early as 1955. The state is basically too big, and it is a principle of administration throughout the world that the smaller a state, the easier it is to administer. Forget all the other cultural, geographical, historical reasons, of which there are plenty. Starting with the present Chief Minister when he was a young MP, and then moving along with Mayawati, there has been a need, because if you go culturally, ethnically, and finally, something, we call a small state here between, let us say, between Kannauj and Prayagraj, just the area between the Ganga and the Yamuna. If you may, we call it Doab. Now, if you make that Doab state, it will be the 30th largest country in the world. Okay, so apart from anything else, you talk about Panchayati Raj, but even in the constitution, it is not really empowered. It is okay to talk about it in theory, but finally in the end, in India, in many cases, everything is top down. And when the whole state is so big, UP, as you know very well, would be the 5th largest country in the world if it existed as a country. So there is a purely administrative reason, but administrative reason to chhod dijiye. I think there are so many other factors, even language, the kind of thing that is another factor that is now maybe controversial, is that in so-called standardized Hindi, some of the variations of Hindi spoken all over UP, which are so important culturally, they are gradually dying out. Literature in all these variants of Hindi is all dying out now today. And when such things are lost, they are lost forever. They don't come back. And we feel, we made the argument that the essence of Bharat is that micro-diversity, which gives us the emotional satisfaction. But at the same time, none of us is in any doubt that we are all proud citizens of this overall country. So I think one has to take, I'm sorry to use the word nuanced, because it's usually associated with waffling or somebody being very weak. But here is a place where nuance is required. Very briefly, because we must move to the second.
And just one quick thing. because of Uttar Pradesh's size, ironically, an Uttar Pradesh citizen is less represented in the parliament than anyone.
Yes.
He's the least represented.
He's the least. He's the least.
So why, and it has very important impacts on the average funds that are released to the state and per capita how much central funds you get.
See, a practical demonstration of this. A state like Tamil Nadu is severely overrepresented today in today's Lok Sabha. So the number of questions that are raised in the parliament about Dravidianism and all that is disproportionately high. The main problems of UP, because UP is so underrepresented, the questions pertaining to UP will not figure so often in the parliament. It's a purely statistical thing, which is why it is very important that every state has a somewhat manageable. The South is, although I come from there, is severely overrepresented in today's Lok Sabha. That is again a consequence of what the Prime Minister in 1975 did. She threw it as a sop to the southern states because she herself was scared as to where this regional thing would all lead. And which is why now the southern states are saying, no, we must have the original. So you see, it is not, present situation in the Lok Sabha is not based on any logic or anything. So it is something, anyway, we don't give the answers as I said, but it makes this, our book makes you think. So that people, citizens, ordinary citizens like all of us, should be able to have a feeling for what this is, that there is a problem, and that any thinking, intelligent person should be able to try to see if he can see a solution in this problem. Because this problem won't go away by just doing that. Some problems go away when you don't do anything, but this one won't go away. Let's go to that.
Thank you. So next, let's talk about your other book, India's Supply Chains in a World at War. So could you tell us in a few words what this book is about and why is it crucial today?
See, a supply chain normally in the MBA sense represented movement of goods and products across various places so that it goes from the manufacturer to the seller. Now, this is okay from an MBA sense when the entire thing was happening within one country. But today what has happened is in the most important commodities in the world like semiconductors, rare earths, fertilizers, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, many countries are involved in the manufacture of a single item. So therefore the relationships between countries is going to be very important in this supply chains matter. I'll ask my co-author to say a few words on this particular topic.
And it is what happens is when multiple countries and companies are involved, there are these choke points, vulnerabilities, which sometimes can be weaponized by one country or the other.
Malacca Strait.
So, for example, think of the Malacca Straits, right? That's a geographical choke point. It's a very narrow passage from where around 70% of the world's oil moves. However, there are these choke points which exist in the nature of the transit itself or in the nature of the goods themselves. For example, the phones we are carrying, almost inevitably the chips inside are made only in one country, Taiwan. And China may or may not weaponize it at one point in time and cause severe distress to all of us. Similarly, pharmacy, fertilizers, so on and so forth. A lot of the world which we take for granted is actually running through these supply chains where every day there's pushing and pulling going on between countries as the global order as we understood it goes on.
See, there are three words which are put in bold in the cover of the book. India, world, war. So make no mistake about it, we are in World War III right now. And this World War is being fought not with guns necessarily or weapons or soldiers going on the ground. Okay, so the war is being fought at different levels through economics, through drones, through artificial intelligence. One of the chapters here is on artificial intelligence and how it can be weaponized. And it has become a regular armament in the theatre of war today. So war itself has a different definition. And hopefully this book will again make people think about how India has to face and fight this war. Nobody gets into a war without the idea of winning. You don't enter a war to lose the war. So what will our policy makers, what are they supposed to do? Exactly how are they going to see? There's another thing, if you go to Arthashastra or if you go to Sun Tzu, who are the two classical treatises on war, they have separate sections on what the situation is for a third weak country to act in the presence of two very strong countries. So if India is number 3 today in the world in terms of overall heft, but China and USA are very much stronger than us in many respects. So Chanakya and Sun Tzu talk about what a third power which is aspiring should behave, how it should behave in the presence of two very strong adversaries. The book goes further. It says that the 21st century is not the century of countries, but the century of empires. And we define 4 empires: USA, China, India, Russia. No other empire needs to be considered. We also define empire as an empire is some place, it's a country which will influence the behavior of other small things outside. So it is able to influence other countries to change their economic policies also. So that is the difference between a nation state and an empire. So we are gradually coming into this business of having to deal with 4 empires. And I'll give you an easy analogy which all of us are familiar. If you have a triangle made of say 3 sides, 3 wooden things, you can't distort the triangle by just shaking it about. But if you take a quadrilateral, it's very easy to distort it. So 4 countries become suddenly a complex system. 3 countries is still a simple system. So the whole idea of complexity, when you say multipolar world, it's a multipolar world with 4 nodes. And the power of these 4 empires will go on changing, increasing, decreasing all the time. So how do you address this dynamics? So through the 7 case studies, semiconductors, pharma, rare earths, fertilizers, energy, artificial intelligence and extraterrestrial. Through these 7 case studies, we tried to see what can India do to leverage itself to the best possible advantage. Our strength in pharma, for example, is much more than our strength in semiconductor. So each one will have to be dealt with in a different manner. So our policy makers, advisors and ministers and all, they are well aware of this. But this we believe is the first ever book which talks about global supply chains in the context of India. This is not some book about America really, but really how India has to deal with America. How does India have to deal with China? And sometimes, and we are getting into the new system which is being spoken, in this new world of supply chains and war, there are no friends and no enemies. Nobody is a friend of anybody, nobody is an enemy of anybody. Each country has its own interests. So it will be in our interest to cooperate with China in the matter of pharma. It may not be in our interest to cooperate with China in the matter of semiconductors. And this is something that both India and China are very comfortable with today, if you are judging from the statements made in the various countries. So this requires a lot of dynamism. It requires a lot of young people also to get into these areas, start doing research in this, and we are giving it as an initial kickoff, because supply chains in India have never been dealt with in the same situation before. And so it's the very first time that somebody is writing a book of this sort, and we hope it will spur other books being written on India's supply chains.
Well, sir has covered almost everything that should be said about the book at the outset. To learn to calibrate to a very new world. Most of us are quite young here, but even others who are not young must be advising young people. The world that existed, say, pre-2008 and post-2008 is undecipherably different. And it means a very different way of looking at things, a very different way of understanding where I can fit in the world, what I can do, where does my country fit in the world, so on and so forth. A lot of this has to do with the hard-nosed analysis of economics. But from this flows a lot of the political decisions we may make, social decisions we may make, personal decisions we may make. So it is not that supply chains are something out there. It is something that is touching every aspect of our life, every single day, every waking minute. So what you see online, right till what you purchase, right till who you depend on, you never know what those supply chains are stretching through and how they may impact you at a time when you might not be ready for it. So it's definitely another book that will make you think.
Thank you so much. Just a last question. These two books that you have written, who do you recommend it to? Who should definitely read these two books? Policymakers, students, young ones. So please tell us who this book have you written for?
Any Indian who's interested in his own future and the future of the country. There is something for everyone as long as they fit within this broad idea of an Indian who's interested. Whether you're a policymaker, whether you're a student, whether you are someone in business, whether you are someone in service of someone, it does not matter because there is something for everyone across both of these books. And there will be some very indelible and important observations you will find that will change the way you look at least something in your daily life and in your overall understanding of your place in the country and the country's place in the world.
Well said.
Thank you so much. And we have
One more question.
So as we talk about it, in our eastern side we have Malacca State, Stockholm. In our western side, let's see
Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz.
Hormuz. These are physical choke points,
Yes.
but there are some virtual choke points, policy choke points, like Europe is trying to impose carbon tax, and United States is posing sanctions on it. So, how India can deal with these issues simultaneously and protecting our interests?
We must first be fast. We must first, when something happens, we should be fast to react. Even better than that, we should anticipate what US is going to do tomorrow. So we have to be very fast. Second, we need to be reasonably accurate. Because if you are fast without being accurate, then you will get yourself into a lot of trouble. But the other saving grace of this is because world events are moving so fast, small mistakes will often be hidden and they won't matter anymore. Especially we have in this green book, we have got an appendix on Mr. Donald J. Trump. So there are some interesting appendixes in this book. One of them is what will happen to India's supply chains if Pakistan vanishes tomorrow, which may happen, we don't know. But the appendixes of which we wrote actually after the manuscript was over, because the events were moving so fast that we couldn't put it in the main book, so we put it in the appendices. So, I mean, Trump is a research topic today for all of us who are looking at these matters. You can write many PhD theses on this man. So, that way, it's a book that is meant for any interested citizen who's thinking about these things and who realizes tomorrow even a youngster of 20 who's trying to look for a job should like to read these books. Because there's another thing here. What's your good name, please? Huh? Aditya. Look, Aditya, the whole thing here is that today you must find an opportunity, find a gap for a young person. Find a gap. If you can get into that gap, then you will make something of yourself. If you just follow the beaten track and just do what everybody else is doing, or you go to Twitter and say, great sir, you are not taking yourself anywhere. In fact, I feel those of us who are sometimes on social media, there's no need, because if you feel enough confident about yourself, the main thing is to find these gaps. Even in supply chains, we have to find a gap. Something which America and China is not looking so closely, you jump into it. And then you develop, like in the rare earths. There are 14 of these rare earths. So what we have recommended is that India cannot concentrate on all these things because we don't have enough science and technology basis. We said select one or two of these rare earths and get a full control of that supply chain for that entire metal. Say samarium. From beginning to end, you know everything about it and you're controlling. Once you get a monopoly even on one of these rare earths, kaam to ban gaya. Then you have the whole world you become the choke point for the world. So you must not say that India has facing choke point. We become somebody else's choke point. Then you will become what is called supply chain landlord instead of what is now presently in many cases supply chain serfs. So the language is little different, landlord and serf. So in some cases we are semi-serfs, but in no case we are a full landlord today. And this is where probably in 5 to 7 years, as I said, it must be fast. It cannot be so slow that, after 100 years, 200 years we'll do something. Nobody is going to wait for now. So how do we do things quickly? So buy the book quickly, read the book quickly, and get me a solution also quickly. That's the way to go.
I have one more question.
Yes, please.
Sir, I have a question regarding the first book. I do understand the benefit of delimitation, but I believe it will surely require a lot of capital and somehow will increase the opportunity cost of the labor. How will you justify it? I understand that it will require a lot of capital, but can you justify the opportunity cost? Because a lot of the time when we see in government office, labor are sitting idle. Then, please explain.
Well, it's not going to cost that much.
See, relative to the average government budgets we have, firstly, it's not going to cost too much, and secondly, a big reason why there is labor underutilization in the country has to do with the economic structure of the country, which has to do with the way we've divided our states. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say you've got a massive state, a Bihar, a UP, a Madhya Pradesh. There will be some regions which have the communities that voted for the government, form the vote blocks that form the government, and they corner a lot of the resources. When that happens, there are two problems that occur. Firstly, that place is flush with government capital because they're rewarding the people who voted for them. And secondly, what happens is you have migration flows which oversaturate the labor, and then you have underutilization of labor. So our economics is intrinsically related to the way our country is politically structured, and you'll be surprised to know Vietnam, who is a competitor for us in multiple things like textiles, they are reorganizing the way their provinces are made simply because they understand that to be economically competitive, I need to reorganize my provinces in a proper way. So there are countries which are already thinking along these lines.
Thank you so much. I think our conversation today has opened a platform for people to think, question, and actually get this book and hopefully get more answers. So thank you all. Thank you, Deekhit. Thank you, Professor Desiraju. We'll have our author signing here. We'll just get a few books signed, and anybody who wants to purchase this book can come here and get it signed and take it home along with you. Thank you so much.
Delimitation and States Reorganization offers practical insights and solutions to this intractable problem and attempts to reimagine how India's political map may look so that its economy and society may benefit. If you're interested in the future of the country, politically, economically, or socially, this book will greatly interest you, and there will be insights which you will find worth noting. Please visit atlanticbooks.com, where you can get this book for yourself and give this a read. India's Supply Chains in a World at War offers 7 sectoral case studies ranging from semiconductors right till fertilizers, right, including pharmaceuticals, rare earths, and AI and extraterrestrial supply chains. These supply chains and what we as India and Indians choose to do will decide the future of this country and its place in the world going forward. So please come to atlanticbooks.com, get a copy of this for yourself, and no matter who you are, as long as you're interested in India's rise and place in the world, this book will offer critical insights to you. Thank you.